every once in a while we talk about something that's like trending, something that's going on in our world that's really relevant to all of us, and we think we should talk about it. And so today we're going to be talking about something that on average, in every household, this happens with your family for 1 hour a day. Does anyone have a guess as to what happens for 1 hour a day, on average?
Sleeping.
Not sleeping. That's more like hopefully 8 to 9 hours a day. Yeah, Logan.
Schoolwork.
Schoolwork? No, not that one.
Video games.
Video game? Nope.
Running into a wall 10 times.
Running into a wall 10 times for an hour? That sounds... Wait, how do you do that for an hour? 10 times? Okay, anyway. Eating? Alright, no, that's not what I was looking for, but it's probably true, yeah? Fighting? Oh, I'm going to accept that. Great job. The answer is arguing. Arguing. On average, people do it 6 times a day, have 6 arguments a day with their family. And I have a thing here, six little bubbles, maybe. And then, that's actually like 42 arguments a week, which is a whole lot more. It's 180 times a month. Oh, that's a lot of arguments. Which is over 2,000 times a year. Look at that! Man, I couldn't even count all of those because I didn't. I just know it's more than 2,000. Is it exactly 2,000?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll trust Dalton. It's exactly 2,000 times a year. I don't know if I have to convince you guys, but if you're anything like me, like either you find yourself in an argument or you hear some other people arguing, or like it's super awkward when you're like in a grocery store and you hear people arguing, right? Anyone? No? Just me? Okay. Or maybe you find yourself in an argument that you didn't want to be in at all. Like, this happens to all of us. And people argue over, like, everything. People argue over sports and politics, especially right now. Elections this week. People argue over family stuff. People argue over family drama. People argue over, like, which, I don't know, anyone have a favorite artist, singer, songwriter person? Anyone? Yeah, you.
It's XXXTentacion.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, alright, we had some fans of him over there, yeah.
I did the calculations, this is the actual number.
Okay, so official calculation of all those little bubbles is 2,190. Thank you, Kurt. That's how many arguments on average happens in a year. Thanks, Jarrett. Yeah, maybe you argue over which of his songs is the best. Maybe you argue if LeBron actually is the greatest basketball player of all time. He is. See, Malachi's shaking his head. Yeah, he is. I agree. Jordan, no, not Jordan. I'm sorry. LeBron can reinvent himself way too many times. All right. So again, see, we argue over things all the time. It just happens. It's part of life. Maybe you feel like your conversations happen to be arguments most of the time. Seriously, stop and think about it. When was the last argument like that you had? Was it like yesterday, this morning, 5 minutes before you walked in? Just think. Yeah, just think about it. No, it's like you can put your hands down.
5 minutes.
Is it something that was really important?
It was 2,196 because this was a leap year.
Oh, thank you. There were actually 6 more on there. Thank you. I forgot that leap year thing. Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, was it something arguing, or did you argue over something that was really big and important? Or was it kind of pointless? Pointless? Yeah, that happens. Either way, I get how you feel. Because, like, honestly, when I was in middle school, I remember, I have 5 younger brothers, so we used to argue over a lot of things, like whose turn it was to unload the dishwasher or take out the trash, or whose turn it was to play video games. And by the time we actually, like, argued for long enough, Mom would come in and make us, like, both empty the dishwasher, and then it just, like, it was the worst. Or, like, we'd argue too long over who got to play video games next, and then none of us would get to play video games. It was just very unfun. So why am I telling you this? Whether you realize it or not, arguments happen all around us. They happen a lot with different kinds of people over different things. And honestly, it'll probably be that way for the rest of your life. Sorry. But it's true. If you go look at social media for 3 seconds, you'll be like, yep, people argue a lot. And arguments are everywhere we look. And I think most of us feel like arguments are bad, right? Like, the way I've been talking about that, you probably are like, okay, arguments are bad. Maybe not the LeBron versus Michael Jordan thing. Like, that one's a little different. You might not think that's bad. But actually, that's kind of my point. Not all arguments are bad. Even arguments that feel bad can actually be turned into something good. Arguing can actually be good if it's done in a way that's healthy and respectful. And I think that's a really, really important subject to talk about, because how we argue with the people around us, with our friends, with our family members and our teammates, and with our small groups, with pretty much everybody, is really, really important. And our relationships are like on the line if we don't figure this one out. So, conflict is part of life because relationships are part of life. Whether it is a soccer teammate, if it's a friend, a parent, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a sibling, a coach, someone in your small group, a random person that you met at Walmart. All of these people you could potentially be in conflict with. You could potentially be in an argument with them. It just happens. And this can be challenging. Arguments can be challenging for a lot of reasons. Because oftentimes feelings are involved. Because guess what? Now, some of you are like, feelings, what? Why is it done with feelings? No. We often don't argue about something unless we really care about it. I mean, don't we? Like, do you argue about... Sometimes we argue about things that we don't really care about. But for the most part, if we're really into an argument, it's because we really, really care about it. We fight with parents about chores that we really don't want to do, or homework we really don't want to do. We fight with friends about one thing or another. We fight or argue with all sorts of people in different ways for many reasons. But it's normally because we care a lot about what we're arguing about. Or maybe it's not that you care a lot about what you're arguing about, but maybe it's because you just care a lot about the person you're arguing with. Maybe you have a friend or a sibling who you really don't want to see make a bad decision, and so you argue with them over that decision. Maybe you have a boyfriend or girlfriend. I heard an ew. Maybe you don't. That's okay. But you really don't want them to leave you, and so you argue with them. And in those cases, our feelings feel like a bigger deal, especially when we care about the person. And especially when our feelings get hurt, or our ego gets hurt in the argument because someone says something harsh or rude or just deeply hurtful in the heat of an argument. And that kind of thing is really hard to come back from. So what do? Oftentimes, if we get hurt in an argument, we do one of two things most likely after we step away from it. We either don't talk about it and hope it gets better by not saying anything, which never really works, or we do talk about it, but just not to them. We talk about it to someone else, like our friend. Can you believe what this person said about me? Can you believe what that person thinks? Yeah. I don't think that gets in closer to solving any of our problems either. I don't think that's a healthy way to deal with argumentation and conflict. Yeah, what's up?
Or you just cry.
Or you just cry. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like you avoiding the person. The first thing I said, we avoid the person. And I think one of the biggest reasons arguments can be a challenge to navigate is this. Other people think differently than we do. Other people think differently than we do. Maybe you've fought with a friend, and they thought that the words that they said were perfectly fine, but you thought that the words they said were 100% not okay. And because you guys have different perspectives on this, it doesn't work out and you fight. Or maybe you've seen people like on Instagram fighting because one person has one belief and one person has another belief and they can't agree because they have different beliefs. The hard part about arguments is that we often don't look at the other person's side. We don't listen to the person we're arguing with as much as we're trying to be right. We're trying to win the argument, right? To prove our point. That's the whole point of arguing, right? To win, to be right. At least that's how it often feels, I think. And that's the mindset we have when it comes to arguments. We want to win. We want to be right. And it doesn't matter what we have to say to make sure that we do that, because losing doesn't feel good. But what if that is actually the problem that's holding us back? What if arguing to win isn't really winning? What if being right isn't actually what's right? Remember what we said. Conflict happens. No matter how hard we try, conflict happens. No matter how hard we try to avoid it or distance ourselves from it. I'm really good at this, by the way. It's one of my key flaws in life, is I like to avoid conflict. And no matter how hard we try, it always comes up. We're going to argue with someone, and I have a wife. I argue with her. I have siblings. I argue with them. I have parents. I argue with them. It happens to all of us, no matter how good we are at avoiding it. And so I think it's important that we learn how to better handle it so that we can aim for something better than just being right. And today we're going to be looking at a verse in the New Testament of the Bible, as we usually do, because here we think that if we look at the Bible, it'll teach us how Jesus lived. And we think that how Jesus lived is the very best way for us to live. And actually we're going to be looking at a book written by the brother of Jesus. Who knew Jesus had a brother? Just Hunt. Wow, I know. There's a couple people in the back. Yeah, Jesus had a half-brother. Oh, more people. Good. That's exciting. Yeah, he had several siblings, actually. One of them was named James. James wrote a letter, and he was actually like one of the leaders of the church. Wouldn't that be crazy to be like, yes, my sibling happens to be the Messiah, the Son of God, and he died and rose from the dead. Any of your siblings, would you say that? No, you wouldn't. That's crazy that James actually believed that Jesus was who he said he was. Anyway, that's a whole aside. But he wrote a book, and it has some really profound and helpful wisdom for us today. I think it's a game changer. So look what it says. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Notice, there's a lot here, and this is really difficult, but let's do this. So first of all, it says everyone. Everyone. So basically, James is saying right out of the gate, hey, this is for everyone, even the people that don't agree with me, even the people that don't like me, the people that think I'm right, the people that don't think I'm right, the people that want to see me win, the people with the biggest tempers, the people that get angry easy, all of those people, this is for all of you. Now, because James wrote this letter to people who are following Jesus, I think this is really powerful. Because this message is actually for everyone, even people who didn't follow, like this is good advice. Even if you don't think that Jesus was who the Bible said he was, like this is good advice. You should probably follow this advice. But especially if you're someone who believes in Jesus, as followers of Jesus, this is how we're supposed to communicate with other people. This is how we can love God and others. This is how we're supposed to argue. So what did James exactly say to do? Well, first he said, be quick to listen. In other words, listen first. And I know this is difficult. If you've ever been in an argument with someone, and they say something where you don't agree with it, or you're like, that's not true, you want to jump in. You want to be quick to respond as quickly as possible and not hear what the other person is saying. I get that. I'm there with you. But what James is saying is, hey, take a step back and try to listen and understand what the other person is saying before you respond. Because remember, the next thing he says is slow to speak. And for some of us, this is really, really difficult to do. Slow to speak. Some of us just want to jump in, as I just said. But James isn't saying don't speak. He's not saying, hey, just don't defend yourself. Just sit back and take it. No. He's saying you can respond, but pause before you do it. Just stop before you talk. To think before we speak. And I don't know about you, but every time I've ever said something that I've regretted, almost always, it's because I didn't really think before I spoke. Maybe you're there with me. Yeah. So James is saying, hey, think before you speak. And if James wrote this letter today, I'm sure that he would also add on to this, like in a little parentheses. Hey, be slow to text, be slow to post, be slow to comment, be slow to talk behind someone's back. Whatever the response is for you in the moment, or maybe afterward, pause and think about it before you actually do it. And then the next thing he says, which is very intriguing, he said, be slow to become angry. And this is a total shift in the way that we approach arguments, right? Because we argue because we're angry a lot of the time. Like, we argue because we're angry. Like, that is the emotion that is leading the way a lot when it comes to arguments. And James was not asking us not to be angry, not to acknowledge our feelings. That's not what he was asking at all. But I think what he was getting at is he wants us to lead with a different feeling. He wants us to choose love instead of choosing to hate. Especially when we want to hate, when we want to lead with anger, James is saying, hey, take a step back, listen first, try to understand. And all of this in order to love the person that you're talking to. Focusing on the person, not the point you're trying to make. It means valuing the relationship above being right. In other words, care more about the person you're arguing with than the point you're trying to make. Care more about the person care more about the person you're arguing with rather than the point you're trying to make. Listen, arguing happens. It's absolutely part of life. Conflict happens. It's part of life. I'm not saying avoid conflict. That's a horrible decision. Don't avoid it. Don't seek it out if it doesn't need to happen, but certainly it's going to happen. So when it does happen, think about, like, are you caring more about the person, or are you trying to care more about the point you're trying to make? What would it look like if you actually did what James was talking about? If you were quick to listen, if you were slow to speak, if you were slow to become angry? Well, what would that actually look like? I think that our world would all be changed for the better, certainly. So how do we do that? Well, I have a couple pieces of advice for us, how we can get real practical here. Like, this is how you can do this. First, I would say actually commit James 1:19 to memory. Memorize that verse. It really is helpful, trust me. Because oftentimes when you're in a situation where you need a Bible verse, like, especially for those of us who are following Jesus, we have His Spirit living in us and around us. Oftentimes, if we've memorized a Bible verse, that Bible verse will be brought up in our minds right when we need it. It's pretty great. It's a really, really helpful thing. So why don't we equip ourselves and better equip the Holy Spirit to help us in those moments when we need it by memorizing this verse. And the second thing you can try to do is apply it to someone. So when you think about arguing, who do you think about? Picture that person in your mind, like close your eyes, picture the person that you think about when it comes to arguing, and then think about that verse while you're picturing their face. Think about that verse. Be quick to listen to them. Be slow to speak to them, and be slow to become angry with them. I think that would change the way that you approach all fighting, especially with the person that you argue with the most. And then third thing, put yourself in their shoes. Guys, this one is really difficult, and it has to do with being slow to speak and being quick to listen, is trying to understand the other person's point of view. Because it's difficult to put yourself in another person's shoes and understand what another person is going through, talking about. I get that. But if we do that, it'll help us to have love and compassion for that person. It'll help us to care more about them than trying to be right. It is absolutely super duper important that we try to see ourselves in the other person's shoes. So remember, care more about the person that you're arguing with rather than the point you're trying to make. And that's exactly what we're talking about in small groups today. So as we head into small groups, be thinking about this question. When I argue, do I argue to win or do I argue to understand?